Barb, let me know when we're live.
I will do that. It's working on it. Good to go on, Ananda.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. I would like to call this meeting to order. First, I would like to offer a moment of silence and introspection. My daughter is a former La Follette student. La Follette is one of the schools that I worked when I worked for MSD. And I know the La Follette community in particular has been dramatically impacted by recent events. And a lot of our students are experiencing a great amount of grief on top of so many other distress. So I want us to center La Follette students and La Follette parents, La Follette families, La Follette staff in particular, but also to all the parents and all the families and the guardians that have experienced a great amount of distress this past summer. So please, I would like to invite my fellow board members and MMSD staff for a few moments of just that introspection and sending healing and love to the families that are experiencing great loss, witnessing sadness for their children. Thank you. I'd like to start by thanking Dr. Jenkins by all the heartfelt messages you have sent along the ways as you just started in your job. I certainly have been following you and following your connections to our families and to our students, and the heartfelt messages were extremely meaningful. So thank you so much. So a couple of things to start us is it doesn't, Barb, can you confirm we did not have any written public comment, and do we have anyone waiting for public comment?
Correct. No written registrations and no public speaking registrations.
Thank you so much, Barb. Next, I'd like to get our minutes here. I move that the minutes from the May 4th, 2020 instruction work group public input session be approved.
Second, Nikki Vandermeulen.
Thank you, Nikki. Any comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Minutes were approved.
There's two there, Ananda. One is for the public input session, the other was for the actual work group.
Okay, thank you. And then I move to approve the minutes from the instruction work group meeting dated May 4th, 2020.
Second, again, Nikki Vandermeulen.
Thank you, Nikki. Any comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Minutes were approved. So let's just jump into the virtual learning feedback report. I know this is a report that we have been greatly anticipated as board members, and I'm sure many members of our community are also really curious about how we have measured our summer virtual learning. What are some of the lessons we have learned, and what are some of the applications for the fall and on? I would ask the board members to please keep notes and tabs of comments and or suggestions or questions that you may have throughout the presentation, and then we'll have a break for some questions. I wanted to really say that I really appreciate Lisa's team and Andrew's team on this humongous undertake. I do know that as soon as I received the survey via email and via text, a lot of folks were talking about, a lot of people were, commenting on. So, it's always good when we hear feedback on our pursuit to get feedback. So, Lisa, anything else, or Dr. Jenkins, anything else before we get started?
I would just like to compliment the group as you've done here with Lisa and Dr. Stats both, and the fine job that they did putting this presentation together. And as you also said, we'll continue to learn and look at the number of feedback responses that we received from our parents and from our students and just other staff alike. And just being out in the buildings today and talking to different staff and talking to staff this summer, I think we've taken this feedback to heart, and we're only going to get better because of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Lisa, are you ready?
I think we're ready, Ananda. Thank you. I just want to acknowledge that it is the first day of school today, and just want to remind everyone that it has been a really important day. It continues to be an important day and an important start to the school year. I want to thank Andrew and his team for the work that they did putting the presentation and the data together. And again, Ananda, right back at you with our teamwork and process and routine that we've sort of established for ourselves. So again, just a reminder that we have been committed to doing things differently this year by starting in a more focused manner and by listening to the voices of the people that we serve and the people that we're shoulder to shoulder with working every day. We've just come off of 8 days of Welcome Back professional development that was put in place after hearing lots of voices at the table. We've tightened up our approach this fall around scheduling, outreach and support, social and emotional support, attendance, scope and sequence documents, and also assessments. And I'd like to say, and actually not everyone probably knows this, we got some feedback from our SEAs over the last couple of months. And this is a concrete example about how we've been using feedback. We will be providing our SEAs with devices to support students. That is new. They did not have devices last year. They told us they needed them. They wanted to be in direct service to children. So that is a real concrete and positive next step for these valued members of our teaching staff that work with some of our students that need us the most. So that's a real win and an example of something that we have heard over the past couple of months that can make us serve our staff and families even better. So I am going to turn it over to Andrew so that he can introduce his team and start the presentation off.
Great, thanks for the intro, Lisa, and Dr. Jenkins, thank you for the intro. However, you give me too much credit, my friend. I'm no PhD, so Dr. Stats has a ring to it. So you may convince me one of these days. I do have Oriana Eversole and Chris Harrison here today. So each of them has been involved very intimately in this kind of evaluation of sorts. It really is a culmination of feedback that a couple of different paths converged and gave us the document and the evidence that you see here today. So if we can get the presentation on screen, I'll use that as a talk through.
Will do.
Thank you, Barb. So in setup, this is very typical of our plan, do, reflect, and adjust cycle. We have our students do this, our own staff, and as a district, we do this. So this is a good example of that work. Now, some folks know that I'm big into complexity theory. So when you have a context that is constantly evolving as we experienced during spring and into summer, the cause and effect of actions is a little less known. So there really is less predictability in the circumstances that we found ourselves. And because of that, you have to explore. You have to draw on some innovative approaches to really gather a broad array of evidence to help you understand the situation and understand what's working and what is not, which is a very long way to say that people's experiences matter a lot, and even more so during the spring and into the summer. So I have Chris and Oriana here joining us. We do have, let's see if I've got everybody here, Jay, Cindy, Lisa, Nichelle, and Sherry. Each of them has something to talk about looking forward. So it is these experiences that have informed all of those next steps. And because of our reliance and use on family and staff and student experiences, as well as emerging practices and even best practices, we can have a lot of confidence in the work that we're putting forward. So I'm just going to walk through a very brief overview of the work that we've done, talk a little bit about our surveys, some key findings, and then turn it over to those folks to get into more detail as to actual next steps. So next slide, please, Barbara. So 3 key questions were part of this exploration, part of this report. How was virtual learning implemented? What were the outcomes of virtual learning, and what can we improve upon? So in very, very basic terms, we really just set out to see what we do, how to go, and what did we learn. As I explained, this draws extensively on individuals' experiences, take those individual stories, and then kind of convert them into overarching stories. Surveys were not enough, as is usual, so we did rely on advisory groups. We did have some additional standalone surveys, as well as some administrative data, things like attendance, meals served, devices put into the field, that kind of thing. The next slide, please. For our survey respondents, over 6,200 family responses, almost 6,000 student responses, over 1,300 teacher responses, 500 instructional staff, and the majority of our principals all participated in the survey. I'll point out that the demographics that are on the screen here are not fully representative of the student body that we have. So because of this, as I indicated, it's very important for us to have gone out and sought advice from specific groups and from specific individuals to help us weave together that full story. Also, we will always make available our survey results and other results at race, ethnic, and other demographic breakout groups to elevate those voices. And then the third thing too is various pull quotes, exemplary quotes that you'll see throughout the report are largely drawn from our community of color. So with this, you've got then the quantitative evidence with the qualitative evidence, and then that gave us some key findings. So Barb, the next slide, please. When we implemented virtual learning, we did have guidance really focusing around the amount of learning, attendance and grading practices, and remote learning platforms, but there was still a lot of variability in what folks had done in the field. Now, that can be a good thing in terms of experimentation. It also makes it a little bit more complicated when you're trying to draw a big picture. Now, many families, students, and staff provided some really positive feedback, really giving us quite a bit of credit given the circumstances, a very understanding series of responses. They really did stand out. But there were also clear places where we could make some enhancements, make some improvements. And the next slide, please, Barb. We looked at, statistically, looked at some major drivers in the survey results. So 3 really stood out for us. And it was interesting to see if these 3 drivers could be improved, as we had seen among some of our respondents, things like satisfaction, level of preparedness, sense of belonging, and those things would actually increase. So if you're looking at the levers, if you're looking at the antecedents, you can look at these 3 things. So supporting frequent and meaningful connection. So we heard this time and again, we would like more contact with our teachers, more contact with our fellow students, greater quality of that interaction. strengthening MMSD guidance. So not only what's expected and needed from students, but also in how families could be supported in this new role of supporting online virtual learning for their family. And then creating robust learning experiences. So if I had to boil it down, we were really seeing major themes around this connection, around guidance, and around robust learning. So if we were watching the Channel 3000 opportunity last week, I did put in a plug to watch this, and I would say that looking forward to answer that question, is virtual learning in MMSD successful, more successful, effective? It really would be around these three things that we would look at moving forward. The next slide, please, then, Barb. So this has informed a bunch of different standalone plans and overarching plans moving into next year. So again, looking at the data that we have, looking at emerging practice, looking at people's experiences, we know that we're on the right track for all kinds of different strategies for this school year. And with that, I'll turn it over to Lisa, and we've got a series of slides with some additional detail there.
Thank you, Andrew. So our findings and discussions related to the data that Andrew shared, and this, these three major buckets that we got feedback around: connection and engagement with families, a need for greater guidance, and then also that need for rigorous learning experiences, all informed. Oh, if we could go back to the last one there, Barb. All informed some of the pieces that are listed here, particularly around scheduling. Scheduling has been tightened up at all of our levels: elementary, middle, and high school. We've provided scheduling guidance with input from the voices that we've heard. I'm really proud that Colleen, our Director of Early Learning, and her team have worked with families and staff to set expectations for our smallest students in the district, our 4K students, and they've put out a robust and interactive weekly plan for those 4-year-olds as well. At middle school, we took into consideration really the complexities that are in our middle schools and the different contexts across the district. We have some middle schools that function in more of a traditional scheduling setting. We have middle schools where we needed to consider what's happening with dual language and how that interfaces with English language instruction, what project-based learning and multi-age is actually what's happening with those schedules out in the middle schools. And then at the high school, the complexity of a comprehensive high school, it took us quite a bit of conversation and listening to the voices to come up with really a schedule that makes sense for students, that is actually doable for students and families, and gets at the rigorous expectations that our secondary students need to graduate. We also streamlined and provided more detail around attendance, and Jay will be sharing a little bit about that. You've heard a little bit about our grading practices, and we'll be rounding back to that in the spring to let you know how that went. We've shared with you our instructional continuity 2.0 plan, and then the and more, certainly to indicate that there are all kinds of ways in which the voices that we have heard have impacted the work moving forward. Next slide. So Jay's going to talk a little bit about the tightening up that we've done with our attendance practices. And you may just want to listen closely to this, because we are going to talk a little bit later in the presentation about the waiver that we are going to apply for attendance that will give us the additional flexibility that we might need, regardless of what format we're in, if it is virtual or hybrid or face-to-face. But Jay will spend a little bit of time now going through where we landed on attendance.
Thank you, Lisa. And I think many of you are aware that last spring, when our schools closed suddenly, our primary focus through attendance was staying in touch with our families, and we took attendance weekly, again, wanting to make sure that they had what they needed, including a focus on basic needs, making sure that they were connected with available resources and any necessary social emotional support. Responding to the feedback that we got from our communities through this survey, recognizing that they wanted, again, more robust learning experiences and more frequent communication, we've now shifted to taking attendance every day, which to our students, to our families, and to our staff feels more routine, something that they're more familiar with. So again, using attendance to make sure that families are connected to resources to promote overall health and emotional well-being, but also to promote and support academic engagement. Next slide, please. We're using 3 different metrics for our students to be considered in attendance for any particular subject or class. And that includes presence in a live or real-time instructional phase through Zoom, completing and submitting any asynchronous or independent learning tasks through the student's learning platform, or engaging in two-way communication, which could take a variety of forms. And in most cases, that two-way communication would be flagging that something wasn't working, either real-time, synchronous, or asynchronous. Any of those 3 will allow a teacher to say that the student was present for the day. Our elementary teachers are taking attendance once per day through their homeroom, and then our secondary teachers will be taking attendance for every one of their classes. Lisa, back to you.
Thanks, Jay. Okay, next slide, please. We've also made some improvements around our family engagement and support strategies moving forward. And Nichelle's going to talk a little bit about the work that her team has been doing in conjunction with teaching and learning and the chief's office.
Yes, thank you. Some examples of how we've really been intentional about uplifting the voices and the feedback we heard from the spring and throughout the summer is, one example is, we know that not all families may go to the website, but when we do have families going to the website, we want to make sure that it is as family friendly and meaningful and helpful as possible. So we have had this collaboration team that has included Family, Youth, and Community Engagement, the Office of Multilingual and Global Education, Instructional Technology, and of course our Communications Department, really working hard to update what we've been known to call our instructional playground, which will provide lots of resources for our families, help point them in the right direction around ways to schedule their day, ways to help set up their students for success, and link to other additional supports that may also be really helpful for them. So we've been working really hard on getting that website updated and making sure that families can use that as a resource. We have also been really focused on wanting to think about our families that are not going to the web and getting out to our food distribution sites over the next few weeks is one of our key initiatives to really hear from families directly. We've come up with like a 10-question survey that we're planning to go out, ask families kind of about how they like to receive communications from the district. What do they last remember about hearing from the district? What apps they might use. And again, this is in collaboration with our communications department, but we think that will help us become even better and more nuanced at getting information out to our families, because we know information is such a key part of our equity work when you really want families to have access and to be in the loop. Again, we always want to focus on our two-way communication and collaboration with families. So this year, through our Welcome Back professional learning, our department had a framework around what is really strong, equitable, anti-racist, and culturally responsive family partnership. And in that, we really wanted to leverage the importance of communication and partnership and collaboration, making sure that all of our staff are thinking about meaningful ways to really keep families in the loop, in partnership in this virtual setting. And then the last thing is our department has really been thinking pretty critically about what are going to be the ongoing supports that families are going to need, particularly our historically marginalized families, around virtual learning and support. And, you know, one of the most recent examples is that the Urban League of Greater Madison wrote their own grant to do kind of support for parents. We've been partnering with them, making sure valuable information to share, and then we're also being present at some of their events. So, you know, we want to continue to leverage our relationship with the community, knowing that the more that we do that, the better families are supported along the way. All right, Lisa, I think it's back to you.
Thanks, Nichelle. And I'm going to say this about Nichelle because I know she won't say it about herself. Nichelle has been really on overdrive working with both the acceleration team and the operations sort of safety side of the house, right? All of this comes together and sometimes impacts families and they feel overwhelmed or they're not sure what to do next. So I appreciate working with Nichelle and her team in order to figure out how to manage this in bite-sized pieces so that we can share information in a way where it all, you know, hooks together and families can understand what the school experience is for their child as a whole. So Nichelle, I just want to thank you and your team for being in all of these meetings and being part of the discussions. Next slide, please. Another example that I wanted to highlight for the board is specific support and thinking that we've been doing around engagement and outreach for our families that have English language learners and children in perhaps dual language immersion classrooms. So we have really worked more closely with our bilingual and ESL teachers to provide greater interpretation, support, and guidance to families. Our BRS, bilingual resource specialists at each of our schools have been making individual phone calls to families to be sure that they have what they need and to be sure that their questions are being answered in a timely manner. We've also provided specific support for families to problem solve concerns just related to technology and how to access their child's classroom and their child's teacher. We've been diligent about translating directions in documents generated in central office. We have really had our translators in central office working overtime to do this. They deserve just a huge kudos for the work that they have been doing and will continue to do. They serve our district in ways and after hours that I think we can not only imagine the long hours that they put in. So just want to also give kudos to those folks who are working tirelessly to support our families with second language needs. And then also the outreach to complete the new remote screener and the individualized learning plans. We still have, right, the compliance and the guidance around Title III that we need to adhere to. And the new screener and the ILPs, we are still conducting those. And we are also still logging those into EduClimber so that schools know exactly what students need in the content areas related to second language learning. Okay, next slide, please. Finally, the last piece that we want to talk about as we prepare to moving forward in the fall is want to just discuss with you a little bit the waivers that we'll be seeking to provide us, as I said, with flexibility, regardless of the environment that we're in. We want to be prepared, we want to be proactive, we don't want to be reacting depending on the situation that we're in. So we will be seeking just a handful of waivers moving forward, waivers around attendance, instructional minutes, and then also the civics exam waiver. Sherry is the lead for us in the legal department in terms of submitting those waivers. We will be happy to go into some detail about each of these. But first, Sherry, is there anything that you want to say to the board in general about the waiver requests?
I'd just like to point out that I remember the last time we discussed waivers with the board in spring, and there was some concern about attendance and instructional minutes, particularly with the instructional minutes. While we do believe that we will actually meet the state and DPI requirements, there are a couple carve-outs in the statutes that require us to ask for this waiver at this time. For example, with regard to instructional minutes, on any day when there's a parent-teacher conference, even if the kids are learning on those days, we can't count those days as instructional minutes. Likewise, we can't count days when there is any PD, staff PD, or in service. And so this is just to make sure when we've developed a plan and sort of commingled our days in different ways that we are able to actually meet what DPI requires, even though technically we will be meeting it. It's just those couple carve-outs that I wanted to point out to the board.
Thank you, Sherry. Jay, is there anything you would want to add around attendance in terms of reason for seeking the waiver?
Sure. As Sherry mentioned, there's just 3 little technical things that we'd like a little bit of relief from regarding the truancy statute. So the statute requires us to inform parents when their child misses part or all of a day. And as I mentioned earlier, at the elementary level, our homeroom teachers are taking attendance once per day, being mindful of the amount of time that we're expecting our youngest students to be online. So we're seeking a little bit of relief there. We're also required by the statute to notify families by the next day of any class time that their student missed, given that we're allowing extra flexibility for our students to complete those asynchronous tasks, recognizing not every student is perhaps available to engage during that synchronous time. We're also allowing some extra time for attendance to be adjusted retroactively, which might impact our ability to notify families in the same usual timeline. And lastly, the statute requires us to include in our communication around truancy the concept of fines or jail time as potential consequences. And certainly, given our uncertain times and when our positive and supportive relationships with families are so critical, we would rather not be compelled to use this specific language, and we're asking for relief there as well.
Thank you, Jay. And then the final waiver that we will seek again is the civics exam. And I think that Cindy is on. If she could talk a little bit about our thinking behind that waiver.
Sure, absolutely. I think Sherry covered the majority of the instructional minutes. I would just add a little more around the instructional minutes, especially at the secondary level and at elementary, where we really tried to balance the time of synchronous versus asynchronous so that students were not on a computer for 7 hours a day. We received a lot of feedback about making sure that we don't have students engaging synchronously for too long of a time. And so with the schedules that we built and the balance of both of those, we wanted to make sure that there was flexibility in those minutes and really thinking about a student-driven schedule. And so just an additional component for the minutes. In terms of the civics exam, as we have had to implement the civics exam as a state requirement, we have embedded it mostly in our 9th grade US history course. And it comes in the first semester of our 9th grade history course. And so there's 2 reasons why we're seeking some flexibility here. One, in the first semester, if students have to be administered the civics exam, they do not currently have a way that we can do it in the virtual environment. So we would be concerned about students having to wait after receiving the content knowledge, that they would have to potentially take it at a later time. The second is we don't believe that we'll be able to meet the accommodations and the accessibility needs for students during the virtual world. And so with the fact that we're kind of in this place of, we know at some point we'll be back in a face-to-face, but we're not sure when, we feel that receiving some flexibility on the administration of the civics exam will be a great benefit for students this year.
Thank you, Cindy. Next slide, please. Okay. That is the end of our presentation, and would like to open it up to the board for any clarifying questions or further discussion. And I want to thank my whole team for being here to take any answers or provide content or context knowledge as well.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Nikki, I see you. Thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you so much, Jay. Thank you, Dr. Oriana. Thank you, Sherry. Who else spoke? Lisa. Looking at the screens, people have turned it off. But anyway, thank you so much for your team for this great presentation. Lisa and I's thinking for the instructional work group today and moving forward is to be really that space for that feedback loop on information that's gathered from the team, information that it becomes public in other spaces, or questions that you might get from our families. So one of the things that I want us to exercise during the instruction work group is that even if there are things that we won't be able to answer now because that we didn't do the presentation for today, but if you don't mind, just sharing with us anyway, so that it's in our minds for future meetings and for the team to hear, like what do you hear from concerns from families, but also what are y'all's concern as well. I will say that as a immigrant in this country, there was nothing about kindergarten that was familiar to me, from starting time to passing time to luncheon time to instruction to parent engagement to aftercare. There's absolutely nothing that I could draw similarities or that I could transfer any prior knowledge from being a student somewhere else. I felt extremely similar today. There was very little knowledge being a parent of a senior on the first day of school today. So I wanted to just acknowledge that we are all now learning how to do school again, how to do instruction again. I know from today's experience that there were a lot of teachers that, that they brought, different levels of skills to their instruction time. The same happened to different students. I know my daughter has already, is very familiar with Zoom. So she downloaded Zoom on her, her personal computer as well. So, there was a lot of, knowledge and access that she was able to already bring, which is not what a lot of our students experience. And then, of course, not every teacher is also experiencing their virtual classrooms the same way. I also heard, I'm now part of 2 different Facebook groups that, East is doing something, very specific to East. La Follette is doing something very specific to La Follette. So, for families that have high schoolers in different high schools, that can be even more challenging to keep up. There's a lot of new information coming this last couple of weeks that may have felt, have made parents feel a little overwhelmed. I know I certainly was kind of making sure that I wasn't missing anything that was happening as far as information. And then also students trying to make sure that they are following up, are they going to get a Zoom meeting invite, or is it going to be an email that they have to make sure that they're getting, different teachers are having different strategies to communicate with students as well. And then lastly, I would say, I just really want us to just be in the space of there's nothing about this year that is similar to any other year before. And so keep trying to draw, this is how it used to be and why we're not having this. It just may not be the most, productive way to do this year. I really wish and hope that people are having compassion to their teachers, to school staff. Lisa, you brought up the interpreters. So every communication that gets sent out to teachers, interpreters have to stop everything that they're doing. That was already a pretty heavy load, and then focus on that communication in order for all the parents to have access to that information. As well as, compassion to our students too, because they are, being highly impacted by all those changes and the uncertainties, and watching as adults trying to build a world for them that we don't even know exactly how to best serve them. So I just wanted to say just those words to really ground us and where we are. So Nikki?
I have about 4 or 5 quick questions, if that's all right. One is just when reporting the data into different groups like race, ethnicity, all of that, could we please include disability as well if it's large enough? Just because I'd like to be able to see the data to make sure that things are like how many individuals with disabilities would filled out the survey. Would be nice to know if we need to make it more accessible for people. For example, I think that'd be really helpful if possible. Andrew?
Absolutely. Yeah, our Tableau treatments typically include all of our student groups. So it would include students with IEP services, ELL, the whole range would be featured as a practice.
Okay, because I just saw the data and I didn't see it in there. I mean, I saw it in the reading, but I didn't really see it in the presentation. The other questions I have are a lot on technology. I know that there's going to be a vote either end of September or early October on electricity and who has to pay and if it's possible. What do we do with families who not only don't have wireless, who may not be able to afford the electric bill? Do we have a plan on how they're going to be able to turn in cents if they can?
Nikki, I can take that one. We just had a conversation with representatives from MG&E last week and our lead social worker, and we're making sure that our social workers, who are quite often right with our teachers in direct communication with families, making sure that we're aware of the landscape across MMSD for the status of those utility bills. And we're thankful that MG&E is working with us to help deliver messages to get families the support that they need, whether it's financial or just simply understanding for current circumstances. And so far so good, and we're hopeful that no family will be put in that position.
I was just worried on that. And also, what do we do if, I know I heard a lot today about Infinite Campus going down. How do we prevent that with bandwidth? Or do we just say that happens? Because I know I'm trying to deal with it with Grace. I get a lot of parents who are panicking whenever it happens. Is there a way I should just tell them what number to call? Should they call IT? I don't know. Sorry.
Can you repeat that question, Nikki?
Yes, Infinite Campus went down 2 or 3 times today, from what I heard from teachers and what was emailed through some teacher feeds. My question is, if Infinite Campus goes down, I got a lot of emails saying, who do I call? Do they call the classroom teacher? Do they call the IT department? Who do they call?
Yeah, I would say anyone internally who's experiencing an issue would use the help desk function, the sysaid function, to contact help desk. I would have to have a better understanding of the type of issues that families were facing with
logins. They said a lot on logins.
The login questions can be handled at the school level.
Okay.
So quite often it can be a school secretary or enrollment. I would recommend, though, to give enrollment the second chance at answering that question, given the volume of work they have these days. But yeah, those are login questions, user IDs, passwords, those kinds of things can be handled in a pretty diverse way. Yeah.
And my very last question, Ali brought this up last meeting, and I happened to recently read an article about a child being suspended because he was playing with a toy gun on virtual learning in another state. Do we even have suspension protocols for virtual learning? Is there a way we could suspend our suspension protocols? Because I'm not sure how we can enforce them.
Yeah, there would be no formal exclusionary practice. As we discussed last week, we're primarily using it to make sure that we're being vigilant to any bullying or harassment within a virtual setting. But other than that, we would not be excluding students.
Just wanted to make sure because that was an excellent question last week, Ali, and was it 2 weeks ago? And weeks get confusing sometimes, but I just wanted to make sure after I read that. And thank you guys for doing a great presentation.
Thank you so much, Nikki. Anybody else? Oh, Ali?
Thank you all so much for your presentation. Andrew, I have one really specific question for you and then a question for Lisa. Andrew, I'll start with you. You spoke at the very beginning of the kind of survey data about the things you did to reconcile the fact that the data was not compatible with the demographics of the district. However, as we went through the presentation, I didn't see any slide that indicated that reconciliation in terms of outreach. So how did you, I guess, summarize the cumulative impact of the outreach you did beyond what you collected in the survey? And how is that information reflected in the presentation we just got?
Sure. Yeah, I think that information is best gleaned from the report itself. And as a survey and collection method, I'll ask Oriana to apply or to reply with some additional thoughts. I would say also, while we have Oriana and Chris here, that I'll also point out that the RPEO team, the Research Program Evaluation team more broadly, was engaged in this process too. Oriana, additional thoughts, please?
And I might have a 3-year-old in the background, so I apologize. So
no worries.
Sorry about that. It's like just in time for me to speak, right? So there are a lot of things that we're trying to do to reach different demographic groups, including asking specific questions about equality and how we supported that and promoted that within the district. And I can speak to Chris's treatment of the analysis as well. Okay, let's see, hold on one second. Okay, so with that, we also do break it down into trying to look at different demographic groups, and then trying to include as well other information that we've gathered as a district through through FICE and community engagement. So we try to look at different pieces. But I do think that there is more that we want to do to be able to do focus groups, to be able to reach out more. And we did talk about that and trying to go deeper on that as well. I think the challenge also came upon what we were doing for planning for fall and how we were promoting that and supporting it. So as a research office, we also are trying to balance all of those needs and trying to figure out how we can also like hear voices and knowing the excellent work that's happening in some other departments to do that as well and working with them and promoting that, and then what we can continue to do. So we are always looking for ways to continue to expand that work.
Thank you so much for that work, and thank you for interrogating that work with such integrity and giving us this additional information. I would say in the future it'd be really helpful to get something that represents kind of the accumulative impact of the outreach that goes above and beyond, but it was really helpful to hear you all describe it. Lisa, thank you so much for acknowledging that it's the first day of school, and also thank you very much for speaking to how our staff have been communicated with and connected with and provided resources throughout this, kind of experience in teaching during a global pandemic. It was incredibly helpful to hear. And also exciting to hear that we're giving people additional equipment and support and supplies to do their work. Can you speak to some of how SEAs are going to utilize additional supplies, support, and tools to facilitate greater experiences for our young people?
And that's a great question, Ali. I'm happy to respond. With SEAs having devices, it allows them to actually be on a Zoom call or be in a small group setting to help support students. It helps them to more easily function as, in some cases, that advisor role to connect with students directly and engage them. If an SEA doesn't have a device or a way to get in contact with a student or support, it's hard to fully utilize the talents that they bring to the table. So it really brings the SEAs on par with the rest of the teaching staff in buildings. You know, when I was a principal, whatever grown-up was in a classroom was a teacher. An SEA, a classroom teacher, or a volunteer that was there, they were all there to support students. So I think this really acknowledges the talents that SEAs bring and helps them to differentiate and customize their support to students.
John, did you have anything else to add?
Well, yeah, the only thing I would add is that we also have SEAs who are engaging one-on-one with students, you know, through Zoom calls, through other forms of platforms. And just as Lisa said, they're an extension of our teaching force. It's an absolutely critical need that they would have the same tools and materials to meaningfully engage students. I think that's one of the lessons learned in the first aspect of our school closure, is that we didn't have exactly all of the right amount of resources for our SEAs to engage our students. So we had to be very creative and use other means. And this actually brings them to a much more uniform standard in terms of working with not only students, but families as well, in terms of engaging and talking through families in terms of how best to support their sons and daughters.
And I would also say SEAs have a team of colleagues in a building as well, right? It's important for them to be talking to each other, to building community with the other SEAs in the building. So it allows them to communicate with each other regularly and over common platforms as well.
Yeah, that's a great point, Lisa. I also think like an extension of that is professional development. Without having consistent access to Chromebooks and or computer devices, many of our SEAs would not have access to some of the professional learning opportunities that we provide. So this brings them to a standard of professional learning, professionalism with providing support to students. So yeah, it's really exciting that we're going to be able to make this happen in the very short period of time.
Ali, are you good? Yeah. Okay, Gloria and then Nikki.
Thank you, Ananda. My concern is really, my question is surrounding, and this may be for my question is about families and our most vulnerable students and families, right? I mean, I think what this has highlighted is the disparity in the inequities, right, that we already have within the system. And my concern throughout this whole process is how we are going to lose students that we were already losing. And I want to know how we are tracking the families who are seeking support, what kind of support, and who's providing that support. We have a lot of community organizations who have stepped up and have helped support our students and families, and really all around instruction, right? I mean, it's not an instructional question, but it all really supports our students to be able to focus. And, you know, we don't, so I want to know that, and I want to know how are we compiling this information for each school? I think what we're learning here is that, and what will come out of this, right, is an opportunity for us to really explore what education looks like, and really investing and looking outside the box on how we support our students through family and through our community organizations. And, you know, I really would like to know how that process is moving along, if we do have that process. I mean, it feels to me, from my standpoint, that it's really all over the place. It really is up to the family who's seeking help. But is there a strategy, an intentional strategy coming from the school district to help support each individual school to identify, compile that information in the data, compile all the organizations who are providing support, and really strategize around how we provide that support. And so that way, when we come out of this, I think it really is an opportunity for us to expand and really learn from what we have been going through, right? And that could look different for us in the future. And that we do continue to utilize those grassroots community partners who are actually going into the homes of our families or engaging one-on-one with our students, which I love, right? I mean, I think that that was a missing link in a gap. And so and right now it's so critical to have that sort of hands-on support for our students. I mean, even it's just, I can just only imagine how hard it is for a student to engage in instructional learning when they're taking care of 2 or 3 of their siblings and mother and father are at work, or there's so many complexities to this. And I really just want to capture the data and the information as a lesson learned for us moving forward.
Gloria, thank you for that question. And obviously, I would say that focus has been sort of at the core of the planning that we've done going back all the way to last spring, in making sure that families and students that need the most are sort of at the center of whether it's our school schedule or the way that we're distributing resources and the way that we're establishing communication. As I look around the space, I think there's 6 or 8 people that can probably weigh in here. And I see Nichelle with her camera on, but just real quick, I wanted to just highlight some of the shifts that we've made in food distribution, some of the shifts that we've acknowledged and highlighted around distributing technology and hotspots. I mentioned earlier our connection with MG&E to support families with utilities, and our social workers spent quite a bit of time this summer supporting families with housing, and that continues this fall. We've had incredible community partnerships, and Bree McPhee can certainly provide a list of all the different partnerships and amazing resources that a host of organizations have brought to the start of the school year. And I also want to just highlight MSCR taking the lead across all of Madison to try to rise up to meet the childcare needs of our families. I think it's our hope that we provide every basic need so that our students have as level a playing field as possible to approach learning, and shifting and tailoring the way that instruction is laid out to recognize exactly what students need to accelerate their skill growth so that we can get back on track. What I can't speak to and wish that we had more to offer is how we're tracking that. It's literally thousands of people across the district, whether it's classroom teachers, social workers, psychologists, counselors, BEAs, SEAs. They're all in communication with our families. And when they find that a student needs something, it's often very informal how they're discreetly providing the support that family needs. And you've gotten my wheels turning to try to actually quantify this. But many of these needs exist with or without a pandemic. It's just that they intensify. And I think those learning gaps intensify because we see the greatest disparity in resources in times like this. But I think that's what I wanted to share. Nichelle, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'll just add, thank you, Gloria, for always, raising the issues of equity and our diligence to really make sure that we are clear of who is furthest from opportunity, furthest from access, and that we are attentive to it. So let me just round out a little bit of what Jay just shared to maybe elevate a little bit of just an example or a story. So as soon as we went into shelter in place last spring, you had amazing social workers, BRSs, principals. immediately reaching out to families. You had PTOs that started doing their own GoFundMe accounts, like they were going to purchase the food and they were going to work specifically in their school community. We had social workers reaching out and trying to figure out how to close the internet and Wi-Fi gap. And what Jay's team was doing, what part of my team was doing, is we had kind of a master document that was kind of just staff-centered, but we were literally compiling every single resource that we knew of in the community, faith-based organizations, grassroots organizations, access and resources that were the most current on rent assistance, utility assistance, anything, you name it, food access. And really we're working hard as well with many of the food distribution organizations to make sure that as many staff as possible knew how we could get the word out, and beyond just getting the word out, really making sure that families could have access. So that was the work we were doing. I mean, literally within weeks of going shelter in place. And then that work has continued over the summer. And of course, we've had some updated information come out as the summer has gone on around eviction moratoriums, yes or no, all of those kind of things. It's the work that we're still doing. I will say we have so many principals and support staff really lifting a lot of that work for families because they're closest to their families and know exactly what they need and where the gaps are. And your challenge to us, as Jay said, I think around compiling all of that work that's happening across hundreds of individuals, including the partners, is a really important challenge for us to accept, because I think that there has been a lot happening. There's more to do, but the better that we can kind of show the efforts that have been made and that we're still pursuing, I think would be really, really important for us to do. So I'm happy to work with any of my colleagues on supporting any of that work as we think about tracking and really compiling it. But thank you for raising it.
Thank you, Nichelle. I think it is important to really come out of this telling our story. We always know, right, that it takes a community to raise a child. And I strongly believe within education, we have lost that community, a strong community sort of organization support with the focus on education. And I think we are learning something here, that if we really spend our energy in, just putting it together in research and really telling our story at the end, we can reshape the way we view education of our children using the same techniques that we have learned through this process when we're not in a crisis, to actually really advance our students, particularly our Black students, through their difficult times. I think it really is an opportunity for us to come out of this ahead and come up with a system. But I really want to capture all the great things that are happening, both internally within our district, really being innovative, looking outside the box, having our teachers, our staff really expanding what they do day to day. And then also our organizations, our grassroots organizations who are out there, who are working in partnership with us. And so just really capturing that story, I think I don't want to miss out on that opportunity. So thank you, Nichelle, for that, and Jay.
Thank you, Gloria. Chris Schmidt and then Chris Caruzzi.
Actually, you forgot me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Nikki, do you mind if we just run through the Chris's first and then go to you if they haven't asked yet?
Absolutely, because they haven't talked yet. I think that's cool.
Thanks. Thanks, Ananda. And I just wanted to build off of the comments and the questions that Gloria had, which I had also had a question around, part of the evaluation report talked about the equity focus and mentioned just briefly the direct support that was happening at the school level. And it mentioned, gave a couple of examples of like one school had created a core support team that went out. Another one highlighted virtual mentors, but I really appreciate the school level sort of creative, innovative, out of the box thinking that happened to actually go out and meet those student and family needs and connect to the community. And so I'm wondering if there's a way that we can maybe Nichelle's suggestions were great about, you know, that whole list, but maybe we could sort of with 50 schools sort of break it down to the highlights of what each of these schools sort of lift that up and find ways to make sure that the communities themselves understand what each other are doing and what some of the innovative ideas are across our schools that might be able to be scaled up and sort of be built off of as we go. Are those core support teams and virtual mentors something that are, I mean, is that one school? Is that 10 schools doing that? Or do we have a sense of that?
Let me just start off and then I'll let the chiefs, I see they're popping on as well. So I know that the student advisors, those are part of the guidance that each child has one as they move through the first day of school and beyond, so that there is actually a grown-up that is, you know, attached to a child and aware of what's happening and is there to be checking in. Carletra and Tremaine, I saw yours go on. Anything else that you would want to add to what you see some schools doing?
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. I also just wanted to say that during principal meetings as well, there was an opportunity for principals to share some of the things that they were doing in that work. So we not only went from the survey information of where we needed to improve, but we also looked at our schools that were doing something that worked really well, that they saw great results for engagement, and to see how we could scale that at other buildings. And so there is a lot of work around bringing together teams to support students that might have disrupted learning. We've collected the data from the spring and looked at the number of students that we have that did have some of that disrupted learning, and actually are emailing that information to principals so that they can have some intentional plans for those students. There are teams that are working together for school leadership teams where they are mentoring certain families, actually not just individual students. And there are also core teams of teachers by grade level that are working together to make sure that there is specific outreach that's happening for families and for students who are not engaged.
Yeah, there's not a lot to add to that. Carletra just nailed that answer with discussing the outreach from our schools and principals. I just want to add, I appreciate the ideal premise of how do we have a narrative or make sure that we are expressing to our full school community the amounts of supports that our buildings and our principals lead in their efforts of supporting our students, especially our most marginalized students. I also want to uplift we also have to be aware, cognizant of respecting individual households and their individual needs. You know, from a humanistic standpoint, we have built a lot of trust with our families who will give us some information and partnering support, but definitely don't want that to be public knowledge. And we want to look at it from a holistic of how we are supporting our schools, supporting our families from a holistic view without going into individual families. So we're very thoughtful about that as well. And I think that plays into how we tell our story. To the point of this team, there have been significant outreach, and like I said, Carletra just named our processes for making sure that those are amplified by utilizing our teaming structures and our principal meetings to talk about our best practices and support of students.
Yeah, I just want to also add, I mean, one of the positives of this pandemic, and there's not many, but it has turned and it's given us an opportunity to be much more collaborative. Chris, you had mentioned, 50 plus schools that are doing their own thing. And often schools will do their own thing because they're really good at that. And this has given us opportunities to share practices and share ideas of how. And with some of the staff that now that we have that are able to focus on some of the engagement and or the search the child find aspect of this, building much more, in my opinion, much more trust and relationships with some students and families that have not been there in the past. We could definitely get lists of things, a drop-down menu of. I think that we're all extremely proud of the work that schools, teachers, our student services, everybody has come around because they're understanding that it's much easier to get lost if we're not looking really hard.
Right. That's great. And I think even just a quick feedback on the virtual or the mentor thing where each high school student is assigned someone to check in. I think even having that instead of knowing that you have 6 or 7 teachers and not knowing exactly who to communicate with if you're having an issue, I think that will help a lot too. Just a couple of one specific question and then one larger general question. There seemed to be some confusion among if classroom teachers are going to be providing small group instruction. And I think it sort of feeds off Ollie's question about how the SEAs are going to be used in their role now that they have access to devices, maybe how the BRSs and other support staff are going to be used. Is small group instruction, is there a consistency among that? Does that depend on the school, on the grade level in the classroom?
I can tell you from high school, we have guidance on which, yes, we're going to be encouraging this, but at the very beginning, we're utilizing this time, one, to begin building relationships and establishing expectations within the class and start talking about the parameters of what those expectations would be. But the best way to be able to differentiate is to be able to break into some small groups, because that was some of the feedback that we had, as well as students were craving some collaborative interaction times with students. Very similar to that we would do when we were in person, in which groups would form in, have opportunities to work and plan and to use each other as thought partners. But it'll take a little time as we, again, want to make sure that everybody's on the same page with expectations.
I was just thinking that there might be some extra challenges of that with technology, and technology could either be a barrier to that or it could be a catalyst to that. And so I think just depending on how that gets viewed at the different school levels and the guidance that's given to schools on that.
Yeah, I would add to that small group instruction is an expectation across the grade levels and at schools as part of the delivery process. And sometimes it looks on a schedule as office hours, but even those are actually small group and one-on-one times for instruction. I just want to tell you I was able to get on a Zoom with kindergartners, first day of school for many of them at Schenck Elementary today. And it reinvigorated the spirit of what it meant to be an educator, to see those small group of seven students, their first experience, and just the smiles and the joy and what it meant to see those young students across the screen just loving life and loving the experiences with their teacher and loving the experience with each other. And they had just only been on for 10 minutes with each other. And that was in a small group setting as they were building relationships and building those partnerships between their peers and building the partnerships with the school. So to uplift the point, yes, it's highly important, but it's such a special place when you see it in action. So I encourage that. There's nothing like the spirit of a young kindergarten student, and we're so blessed to be able to educate these young men and women.
Thank you.
I think Dr. Clarity pretty much summed that up. I just wanted to add that as we continue on, that small group instruction will also be important for feedback and for students to have that intentional feedback from their teachers, but then also for teachers to hear the feedback from students about what they need to be able to adjust for learning as well.
Chris, you
That's
have
great.
one more question?
Yeah, just one more question, and I think it's for Andrew and the evaluation team. Is just as we, you laid out a few metrics that are going to be important, and what we learned based on what happened last spring with virtual learning. We know we need an increase in synchronous teaching and learning, an increase in teachers' ability to provide rigorous and challenging instruction, and an increase in attendance and ways to engage students, making sure that students are engaged and connecting with us, having those meaningful connections. Are you going to have a way to share if we're being successful in that in the next couple months, or where we may need to pivot or provide more support for staff in doing that? I guess how will we measure that going forward?
Yeah, it's very important to monitor our progress. As I said at the outset, very complex circumstances, so it's good to get a quick read on things. We did have earlier conversations about when we would field, for example, another survey about how things are going. Of course, you have to wait longer than the very first day of school to ask people's opinions, so the timing of that one's going to matter. And that kind of an instrument we would look at certainly what we had fielded before, so we can have some commonality, but then also as informed by all of these other learnings. So hitting really very specifically those 3 sub-bullets that I described earlier. So yes, there are plans to do some monitoring. Our team does have to get together to figure out exactly what that would look like. But today we do know that we've got an evaluation that points us in some pretty strong directions, and then try to build the infrastructure around that and try to establish then the pace. And part of our earlier conversation suggested perhaps quarterly. So then we would have an opportunity to take that snapshot then in October and have that available. Yeah, I think it's a similar timeline to what you're thinking.
Great, thank you. Thanks everybody for the answers to those questions, and thanks for all the work that's going on this first week of school in connecting to families, connecting to students and staff. Support that everyone's getting is really, really important. So thank you for all the work.
Thanks, Chris. Karuzi?
Ananda, I want to start by thanking everybody for a really good first day of school. Talking to parents, everything wasn't perfect. Talking to staff, everything wasn't perfect, but we pulled it off, and that's no small feat. So I just really want to thank everybody for making virtual learning happen in a pandemic. It's pretty amazing when you think about it. I have 3 questions. My first one is pretty cut and dry, and it's about the waivers. I'm wanting to know when we're going to see the waivers and when we're going to vote on the waivers.
It was the thought that you would vote on them at the regular board meeting at the end of the month. And what do you mean by when will you see them? It's a DPI form, so it's not, normally I prepare a memo to DPI, but this time it's pre-formatted by DPI, so it's pretty much check boxes and a couple questions to answer.
Okay, I'm assuming we'll see that for the vote.
I don't know if it'll be ready for the vote because that's part of the vote is the actual document. I can give you a draft so you can see what it looks like, but it's not much information.
Chris,
it's not as.
Oh, sorry, Sherry, go ahead.
It's not as detailed as what I normally prepare for waivers because just as in the spring, DPI sort of pre-formatted everything. So I don't have much leeway in discussion or anything like that.
Chris, is there some information that you're trying to understand more, or a language specifically that you're looking for?
I just want to know, before we vote, I want to know specifically what I'm voting for or against. So just making sure that we have more in place than just there's a waiver on this and there's a waiver on that.
So
seeing the DPI form would be really helpful. Knowing which boxes we're going to check would be helpful before the vote.
Yeah, I think our staff heard your concern. There might be a link that you can see what the form looks like, so and then maybe our staff can provide some articulation of what we'll be writing on that, and I hope that would be sufficient. Yeah, I see Sherry nodding. Do you have another question?
I do. I have 2 other comments. my first one is on, I guess, just building off of this evaluation. You know, as we move forward, a really important part of leadership is asking the right questions. And as a board member, I would love to know specifically what questions administration is asking to make decisions about how we continue to refine and improve virtual learning throughout this year. I have a few that I don't expect anyone to attempt to answer tonight, but I would just like to throw out there as things that I'm wondering about and that might actually help us understand how things are working. A lot of them relate back to what Gloria and Chris brought up. And I appreciate your raising the questions that you raised. The first one's about instruction, and I would just really like to know how we're defining and assessing robust learning for all kids, but specifically for our most vulnerable kids. I'm not totally clear on what that is about and how we're measuring robust learning. And again, I don't expect you guys to be able to answer this tonight, but I think they're good questions to talk about as we move forward in evaluating what we're doing. The second one's about staffing. Do we have enough staff and supports in place to serve and engage kids in a virtual learning environment? I appreciate the conversation we had about small group instruction. And I'm also hearing from multiple staff people that they're getting mixed messages about small groups. On one hand, they're being told they're a good thing to do and they should do them. And on the other hand, they're being told that there's not enough staff in the school to actually have small groups all the time or even at all. So I feel like it's a situation where our budget limitations and our hiring freeze are crashing into the ideals about how we want to do virtual instruction, and trying to assess how that actually plays out in reality, I think would be important. A third question I have is just about the leadership of our staff and their voice in shaping virtual instruction. How are we engaging educators in designing virtual learning? Allocating resources, addressing challenges, and solving problems as we move forward. I think it would be really good to collect qualitative and quantitative information on how staff are helping to shape this new way of working. And finally, this is completely reflects what Gloria asked, but how are students and families benefiting from the community support that we've leveraged? I think it's like Gloria said, it's critically important to understand how we are using that community support to make sure that we're offering opportunity to everybody in a really, really difficult time. I think we also need to talk about, again, the strategic framework, which should be our keystone and all of the work we do. And we have a whole bunch of metrics in there that don't really pertain to the virtual learning environment. A lot of the climate power questions we're asking assume we're in our buildings, and a lot of, many of the assessments we're doing of learning are MAP scores, which we're not doing this year. So it would be really helpful to understand how we're going to measure our progress toward our strategic framework goals in the virtual learning environment. And my final comment is just, I really want to encourage everybody, in addition to contending with the many, many challenges and opportunities we have this year, we also need to continue to take the long view when it comes to the direction our schools are headed in. This pandemic won't last forever. Virtual instruction is a temporary thing. And ultimately, we have goals to try to improve instruction, particularly reading instruction, to make sure that we get all kids up to speed and close gaps. And I don't want to lose any traction or progress on those goals this year, just because we're doing virtual learning. At the end of the day, we still need to be doing the work this year to improve reading instruction and other instruction once we get back into our classroom, so that we can start to close those gaps and see the results we want to see. That's all I have if anybody wants to respond.
I think I'll respond to just some of that and say we're going to get back. We are having these questions that we're raising amongst ourselves in terms of how we're going to continue to progress. I want to just remind us all, though, whether or not we want to realize we are in a pandemic right now, and it's on multiple fronts. And so we're trying to balance that with attending to, as you've heard throughout these presentations tonight, what our students need from a socio-emotional standpoint, but we're not lessening what we think should be a rigorous if you would say, a rigorous course offerings, but we're trying to balance that with what our students are currently going through, their reality in terms of the trauma that they're experiencing, not only just COVID-19, but we've talked too about the racial trauma that students are having, and how they're trying to process this coming back into our schools. We realize that we not only have the summer slide for our most vulnerable, mainly Black, brown, special needs children with language deficiencies, but we also have this high intense racial environment that we're in too, that everyone's impacted. It's not just the children, but our staff, they're coming back with a number of these concerns as well. And we're still processing this. Opening up this fall, in my 30 plus years, never been something like this. And we're all trying to find the magic balance between ensuring that our students are learning at high levels and that we're doing what we said we're going to do in our strategic framework, making sure all of our environments are a safe place for students, right, and the adults. And we're dealing with the strategic framework when we talk about the community piece. And so the questions that's come up tonight about how we're measuring, I think quantifying that and looking at it from a quantitative and a qualitative level, this is an opportunity for us. And I think those are the right questions to be asking. And I think we have to go deeper. And I think I've heard the staff say, we're going to respond to that. And they appreciate those questions. And we're in the infancy of it, being that today being the first day, but we've been working on this all summer. And I am going to say to all the staff, they're being very modest because they have not articulated even more things that I know that they've done in my short time being here over the summer to make the connections. But I do think that we have to have a responsibility to quantify it in a way that we can lay it out. It's our narrative. We need to do a better job of sharing our narrative, and don't be modest about it at this point, because if we don't document it properly, then we will get positive results, but can't explain them. We need to go back and intentionally lay out exactly how we're going to do it and why we're doing it. But I think Dr. Clarity's point in terms of the work we're doing, some of it, making people feel like they belong, is also not sharing their issues with other individuals. So we're going to have to do this in a way that we haven't had to do it in a way. We document it, but not in a way that we share someone else's hardships. And that is just who we have to be when we start talking about belonging, our core values. I really appreciate this, Chris, and that's why I gave it the thumbs up, what you said. But let's go back and have this intentional discussion about how we're going to measure, because I don't think anyone has a real answer for everything it is that we're doing right now and all the places we have to go. But I agree with the long view, Peter Swartz taking the long view. We have to also go there. And I don't think when you say in terms of the pandemic may go away, but going back to where we were, that's unacceptable, because where we were, there were many children not being successful, and we were just pushing them through. And I'm talking about a Black, brown, I'm talking about a special needs children. I'm talking about advanced learners were challenged in the former system that we had, and they were dropping out of school as well. So I'm looking forward to the new day and these opportunities we have before us right now, but we must document it so that we can continue to repeat it over and over and over. So thank you for those questions, and sorry for the long response.
Nikki, Savian, oh, Chris, are you done, Chris?
I'm good, thanks.
Thanks. Nikki, is that okay if Savian goes?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Savian, go ahead, and then we'll go to Nikki, and then we're gonna wrap for a 5 minutes bio break, everyone.
Got it. Thank you so much, everyone, for the great presentation and update on virtual learning. I heard very positive remarks about the first day of school, and maybe proud to serve on this board. I just had a few quick questions. One was, how is the Office of Youth Reengagement adapting to the new virtual learning model that we're trying to do? To what ways do we think will be successful in getting a larger response rate, more representative of the families we serve in our surveys? And then the final question is, with suspending the civics exam, I know we have received a lot of great proposals on how to incorporate more Black history, more history of people of color and our demographics. I'm wondering if we could use that as an opportunity to build maybe our own history, civics assessment or learning opportunity for students.
So Savion, let me start with the civics piece, and then I'll hand it off to Andrew about some of the other surveys. The civics exam is a state requirement. I would say more importantly than the civics exam is our ability to work with our staff to interrogate our curriculum, to teach the history that is real and true. The civics exam, I would say, is more of a compliance kind of a thing that can't be substituted with anything else, which is why we want the waiver. But what you talked about in terms of the Black history and the authentic text and the authentic curriculum that really uplifts and sees that the experiences our children bring are assets, that's the real work that we want to be doing. And whatever happens with the civics exam, we're going to be fine with the waiver or even not. But more importantly, it's that work we're doing around interrogating the curriculum for exactly what you're talking about. And we mentioned that the last time we presented, I think it might have been just last week, that was the work that the 150 staff members did over the summer to develop those really meaningful and engaging experiences with students. The civics exam will always be there in some form or another, but what you're talking about, that's the real work. Andrew?
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, I would say that the strategy of supplementing our survey results with focus groups, with advisory groups, with targeted outreach, great examples of being successful with that when it came to the referendum, having an understanding of where the community sentiments lie. This time, though, we were quite frankly hindered by a very short period of time. So we were operating really within Q4, and trying to get people's opinions over the summer is never terribly easy. So our ability to tap into pre-existing gatherings was kind of cut short this year, in part because there were a lot of shifts in the way that people could have those get-togethers. However, this time with a longer window, with, I believe, some more well-established routines, I do think that we can actually re-engage with those existing opportunities to extract that voice and lift it up. And I would also say that if there are strategies that folks here on the board, anyone watching, if they believe that there are strategies or opportunities, venues that we could exercise that we're not, then I would certainly love hearing them. Certainly this board, with discussions of the referenda coming up, it really comes down at times to individual connections and being very diverse and diffuse in our promotion of opportunities to provide input. So yes, we have a few different strategies that we have used in the past that we had fewer opportunities to this time. So again, with a longer window and with some of those opportunities coming back virtually, but there are also opportunities in person that we still can tap into. Nichelle and Tim and I and a few others have been talking about how to reach some families that are at times the hardest to reach, and those are often in-person opportunities. So contemplating different strategies for those opportunities while they still exist. Yeah, thanks for the question.
And Savion, you asked the question about Opportunity Youth. Megan Buckner just took over the position as Paris went to Verona, and we were able to bring on Yana Williams to be able to help support through the curriculum coordinator position. We've been working closely with Madison Metro, with some of our students that are at Metro right now to ensure that there's access points in. Through you all last year heard about the micro school that we established at West, listening to the students' voices We are actually making a shift, and we're allowing some of the students to return, as it originally was a one-year program. But we saw such growth. We're having some, and we thought that those students could become mere models as we are recruiting and bringing in some new students in. Unfortunately, within the pandemic, we're still working a little bit around all the accesses that we had when we were at the Boys and Girls Club and at Goodman Community Center with the Transition Academy. So we're working through some of those logistics. But one of the things that Yana is able to bring in is she actually was working with us last year through the Opportunity Youth Coalition through the city and through United Way. And she was doing some Dear Diary programming with Memorial students, in particular some of our 8th grade transition students in. We're looking at how to expand that now for more students, as well as we know that there is a gap on how we can provide supports for some of our female students, in particular students of color, in particular African-American female students. And so there's a lot of work going on right now in that field. There is we have held on some hiring positions, but Yana and Megan are working very closely. Myself and Cindy Green are working with them as well to be able to continue providing opportunities within the schools.
Thank you so much. And just contemplating on Gloria's question in terms of how do we help the students who need resources the most. I know that office and our Opportunity Youth program will be instrumental. So if there's any work the board can do to further support that work, please let us know.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And the positive is Megan and I, we just met with Anthony Cooper, people from within our community. I mean, the community is reaching out right now, wanting to come out with different ways to be able to support students, being innovative. And understanding to give opportunities for graduation track as well as lifelong skills. So we're hoping in the next month or two, we're going to have some really exciting news of things that we're trying to accomplish at no cost to the district, but at great benefit for our students.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Savion. Nikki?
Yes, I wanted to say I'm really excited about the SEAs and the laptops. I think that's going to be a tremendous help, and I wanted to amplify that. Also, I think it'd be helpful to know, we were talking about the in-person instructions in the small groups. Do we know how many staff we need in person? And do we know how we're going to do that with the PPE? I'm just curious if we could get back on that at some point. Would be really good to know, just so we could get everyone prepared on the same page. Because I know individuals with disabilities can go to school in person K through 2, and just curious how that works. I think this is a John question.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to address that, Nikki. So today was the first day. We've had kids in school today, and for in-person instruction. And just let me clarify. About a week ago, there was an amendment to Public Health's Order Number 9, which allowed for in-person instruction for students with disabilities where their IEP teams determined that needed to benefit from their program, from early childhood through 12th grade. So it's not just K to 2.
Okay.
The amendment opened the door for all of our students. So yes, we've had students in our school locations. We have students in the community, primarily in vocational settings for those at the high school level, the 18 to 21-year-olds, as they begin to transition to adulthood. So do we have enough staff? You know, I think right now it looks very, very close. And I would say there's a couple of schools that I feel like we're going to need to adjust their level of resources. And so we're in the analysis phase of analyzing what schools are a little bit low and what schools could potentially get by, so to speak, with just a little bit less, just to ensure that we're balanced across the system. So just to give you ballpark figures, you know, we're looking at between 3 and say 6 to 7 students with disabilities at elementary schools, maybe a little bit more at the 2 larger elementaries. about 4 to 8 to 9, 10 students at middle schools. And our high schools have about 25 plus students for in-person. And that's a little bit of a mix of students who are exclusively in the community. So they don't actually come to school. It's about half and half. So of the, say, 25, 12 or so, 12, 15 would be actually coming to school. And then the balance would be reporting to their work locations, home to work, and then back home. And just to also give you a sense, like it's exceedingly rare that our students would just be going to the school location, the 7:30 to say 3:30. It's very much focused in high intensity instruction. Generally speaking, one-on-one settings. We're combining students where that makes sense and where there are like instructional needs, as well as we can ensure safety to the degree that that's possible. But by and large, this is falling into a lot of one-on-one and very small groups, maybe pairing 2 students and a staff person. So I'll just take a pause there. Hopefully that addressed your questions. And by all means, if you have a follow-up, I'm happy to address that.
I just have one. Is there PPE for the student as well as the staff?
Oh, yes. Sorry I forgot that. Yes. So there are personal protective equipment, PPE, for staff and students. And, frankly, we're recognizing that some students are not going to consistently be able to wear a mask throughout the course of their time in schools. And we're expecting students to do so, but we know that there will be extenuating circumstances. We have constructed plexiglass barriers like they have at grocery stores and so forth. Staff have personal protective equipment, gloves, masks, shields, and gowns where necessary. So yes, each school has their materials, and I would say that they have a starter set of materials now, and we know that we're going to be needing more, and we're frankly doing a continued analysis about like what's the right amount, what's the right materials to be providing to students and staff.
Thank you. Just please keep me updated, and thank you very much for the answer.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you for your questions, Nikki. I just have one final, well, John, since you're up, let me just ask you this. What has been your greatest challenge so far with making sure that students with IEPs are being served?
Well, I would say that when order number 9 first was provided to us, that was a very surprising development. And I say that weighed extremely heavily on many of our special education team members, to kind of be planning for the transition back to face-to-face, and then to have that emerge as another potential barrier. I would say that caused a bit of a pause in terms of think of all the logistics that go with that, lining up specialized transportation, lining up all of these different factors. That was extremely inconvenient in terms of timing. I would say too that the greatest challenge has been to kind of assemble the very complicated service delivery we have special education teachers supporting general education classrooms, and then also supporting students in person. So I think it's the combination of just multiple environments and very specific needs. We had to convene many IEPs, during the summer in a very compressed period of time. And I think it's a very overwhelming amount of work and logistics that kind of came to bear in a relatively short period of time. And nonetheless, as was noted earlier, but today, we started and things went quite well. I mean, very, very well, given the incredibly difficult circumstances.
Thank you so much. And then one final question in regards to, we talked about this exciting role that SEAs are coming to be utilized. Are there other staff, and I'm thinking particularly security staff, that we can also potentially think about their roles with the students? I'm thinking back to Gloria's questions, like the students that were already disconnected, before. I think the security staff, this board has talked before about the great opportunity in the largest unit of people of color in our district, and their ability to have a very deep, meaningful relationship with families in different ways. And also many of them are deeply rooted in our communities. So I'm curious about, can we utilize their role in different ways to fill in this opportunity around engaging with families and engaging with students?
So I think I'll start in general, Ananda, and then maybe Mike or Tremaine can chime in. But I think we've been finding, right, there are lots of different staff with different roles that are connecting with students in very personal and certainly very engaging ways. So we want to be sure that every grown-up that's in a building, regardless of title, has certainly a feeling of purpose and connectedness. We're all craving that human connection, we know that. So we want to be sure that each of the adults in our buildings is able to connect and have a relationship with students. Mike, did you want to address specifically any other job categories?
I'm going to be honest, I just ran upstairs to use the restroom, so I caught the very tail end of the question.
Oh, yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Didn't you hear me say the bio break is coming soon?
I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. So thinking about, because we talked about the SEAs and how we're utilizing them, and thinking about our security staff, they are folks that have deep connections with our community. They have lots of relationships with different students. Is there an opportunity to utilize them more than what we are currently as just placeholders for buildings? Or, I know some of them, I've talked to some of them and they're like, they keep trying to find us things to do. I'm like, oh, wow. Like, back to Gloria's questions, there's such a great opportunity to engage in informal ways with our students, in particular the students that were already disconnected from school pre-COVID. Is there an opportunity, or is it something that you all are thinking about or are interested in talking more about it?
Yeah, oddly enough, last week or a week and a half ago, Dr. Jenkins and I went and visited a few high schools, and we were at Memorial High School, and two of our SSAs were there, and they were talking to us about ways in which they feel that they've been reaching out to students during the summer just because they've been worried about everything that's been in the news. Jess sent me an email, and then I reached out to Mark Brown and to ask him about some of the SSA assignments, and he sent them to us. So at this point, we're seeing how the year is starting off, but there is some innovative ways in which our SSAs are thinking about ways in which they could do some of the connections as well. I mean, often you'll see some of our students that are disengaged, they actually seek out our SSAs because there is a connection that's built in and a feeling of whether it is safety or whether it is just seeing a mere model, and we'd be foolish not to take advantage of those already built relationships. So the question that you ask is something that Dr. Jenkins and I had heard, and we're working on that right now of ways that we can expand and extend with our SSAs, with some of our SEAs, as well as the MSCs and the other people that are in the high schools. But yes, that's something that we're working on.
Thank you so much, Mike. Tremaine, do you have anything else, sir?
I think, welcome back, Mike, by the way.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh,
Go ahead, Tremaine.
My bad.
Anything on screen goes dark all the time.
But Mike covered it. I just, just the importance of what our SSAs bring, as well as other staff, that they know the students, but they also know the extended family structures at times and the community structures. So yeah, it's not just about the student or one child. They're able to to help bring groups of students together still, maybe sometimes in a virtual setting or with like experiences. So to your point, that has been thought about it, and it's something we will continue to leverage the talents of all of our staff members, because all of us have to think about education in a new way. So we appreciate you lifting that up in this platform as well.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. All right, everyone. I was told that we are actually don't have much more to discuss. Both the report feedback and the waiver requests are going to come to us later on this month. Lisa and Dr. Jenkins, anything else to wrap us up for tonight?
Hey, one thing, first of all, thank you to everyone. And I want to make sure I'll talk, Lisa, you and I can talk offline, because I think Chris' question relative to what they're going to be voting on and how we're going to present that to you guys. And I may just have additional questions about that, because I want you to definitely get all the information you need, even though I know, Sherry, you explained that about as well as it could be explained. It's going to be basically a checkoff, but I want you guys to have the background information on that. And thank you too, Jay, for that explanation around the attendance. And so that everyone knows those surveys really mean a lot, and the way that the team responded to the surveys around attendance. That was a big issue everywhere last year, because we were trying to force people to get things in the same day. And we responded by giving that additional time. So thank you to everyone.
And Dr. Jenkins, to your point, do we have informal ways in which parents can either give kudos to a school or to a particular teacher, or to say, hey, this hasn't worked so well? Do we have sort of a, comment box, so to speak, on our website or somewhere on Facebook that we can maybe share it with our networks?
I think we need to expand on that. I'll have someone else answer that. I've been receiving a number of emails right now, kudos to some of the principals and some of the teachers and things that's happening, but we need to have a systematic way where comments can come in and it can be public, as simple as that. But perhaps someone else want to respond to that question right now.
There is an MMSD shout out address that you can fill out online, and it goes directly to the staff member as well as the school, and then the schools then put it on their social media sites. So that is one, but I don't know how publicized that is. So that's something I think that we should explore and get out more to our community.
I agree, Mike. Andrew, I see you nodding. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
Simply that we are looking at a whole host of strategies. It's not going to be one simple tool that gets us the answers that we need. So I just made a note to myself, in true, innovation form with Post-it and Sharpie. We'll put that one in the hopper as well. And it's proved a very valuable tool for budget input, for referendum questions, those kinds of things. So we'll take that to the team too. Thank you.
But you got to write it on your hand too.
Thank you. Lisa, anything else you wanted to add? And I want to give my fellow board members an opportunity to give their own shout outs to educators across our district for all the amazing work they've been doing. Lisa?
No, just want to, just thankful for the discussion tonight. Definitely we'll put something together to clarify all of the waivers. We'll get that in writing along with the consent. So we are good with that. And just look forward to continual virtual learning updates as we move through the year.
Great. So Nikki, did you want to say something about this? Or
I just wanted to put a shout out.
Oh, hold on a second. So let me just frame. I'm going to call you first.
Okay.
So yes, first day of this year. So I wanted to invite all of you to share in whatever ways the appreciation, the acknowledgement of the educators across the district, not just the formal educators that we have, the ones with license, but also other adults that support our community to be really strong, and for our students to continue to to have courage for what this year is bringing us. So Nikki, please start us out.
I just want to thank the O'Keefe Art Department. They've gone to many, both on State Street and other buildings, and decorated the buildings and chalked the sidewalks. And I always thought it looked really nice. And they didn't have to do it. It was just something they did, and I think they should be thanked for it.
Okay, Gomez Schmidt and then Carusi.
I just want to say that each level of school and learning that we have is going to provide its own unique challenges and own unique solutions. And so from the teachers and staff that are taking care of our littlest learners, our 4K and our kindergartners, to the staff that are taking care of our juniors and seniors and everyone in between, just thank you for all the work that's going on and the time and energy that you're putting into the start of this most unusual year. Have a good week, everybody.
I likewise want to send out immense gratitude to all of our educators and everybody who's working on our school buildings right now. We tend as a society to hold educators to incredibly high standards. And at the same time, we're in the middle of a pandemic and there are no good options for educating kids right now. Nobody really wants to do virtual learning, but at the same time, in-person learning is not a better option in terms of the health and safety of our children and our staff. And so we're making the best of a bad situation. And I think if nothing else, this could be an opportunity for us to maybe not put teachers on a pedestal quite so much and start to appreciate their humanity and the fact that many of them are simultaneously trying to do virtual learning and parent their own kids through virtual learning, and how incredibly hard that is. And the fact that everybody made it through today, and we know there were hiccups, we know that there were technical difficulties, but we all made it through today. All of our kids learned something. All of our kids got to reconnect with people who they love and respect and want to see. And that means the world to me as a board member. And I think I speak for everybody on the board when I say that. Teachers don't go into teaching because they love technology. Some of them do, but all teachers go into teaching because they love kids. And I think it's just as hard for our educators not to be with kids as it is for our kids not to be in school. And I really want teachers to know that we deeply, deeply appreciate how much they're giving to their profession and to our kids this year. Thank you.
Ali and Savian.
Yeah, thank you so much for this prompt, Ananda. I think it's very easy to be incredibly grateful for our faculty and our educators and our support staff, and as well as our administration that is doing so much work behind the scenes to make everything work. Quick shout out to the class of 2032 who is entering school right now. So if you are a kindergartner and you are starting school, you are the folks who can make virtual learning seem normal and make it adorable and make it cool. Nobody makes virtual learning quite as cool as the 6-year-old in my house. So shout out to Isa for putting on a velvet jumpsuit and getting it done today. And thank you to my board colleagues for letting us end on a very positive note. And welcome again, Dr. Jenkins. Happy first day of your school year. We're glad you're here. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for leading us with such integrity in the brief bit of time you've been here. I'm very excited to be working with you this year.
Savian.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just want to give a shout out to all school staff going above and beyond to make it work for our students and families, and for our students and families that are adapting to very quick changing environments. I do want to give a special shout out to our mental health team and our school psychologist team, our school counselors, really providing that intrinsic work to ensuring that our students are socially and emotionally well in this very difficult time with layered COVID layered on top of the racial injustice we're seeing in our country. So that work is just invaluable. So thank you.
Gloria and Chris Schmidt.
Yeah, hi. I'm sorry I had to get in the car to pick up my daughter, but just want to I want to thank Dr. Jenkins for his, completing his first day and just all the work that he has done. Since he came to Madison, I'm so optimistic for his leadership and looking forward to working with you, Dr. Jenkins, and our administrative team for adjusting so quickly. I have seen you all just adjust and work through this virtual learning process from day one, and I appreciate your work. And to our teachers, our social workers, and all of our staff who are in our schools who made the first day easy or look easy anyway. I'm just looking forward to what's coming next. I want to ultimately thank our community organizations who have stepped up to help support our students and our staff and providing the additional support to our families and our students. We can't do this alone, and so your ability to step up from all across the city of Madison has been so impressive. And so thank you all for your support. We are a strong community. I see that. And we see that through crisis situations. And this is the time where everybody has lifted each other up in our school district. And I'm confident in the future of MMSD and our students. So thank you.
Comments?
I already went, but I'll add to the school counselors and social workers. I'll just add the school nurses into that. Huge shout out to our school nurses who are going above and beyond at this time. So thank you.
I thought you did, and then you changed on the screen. I didn't want to miss you. So I think everybody has gone, correct? I didn't miss anybody. You all are changing everywhere here on my screen, so I want to make sure that everyone has gone. I just wanted to start by thanking all of you, my fellow board members, for a new year. This last year, there was a lot. And although I don't always agree with your political stance and I always agree with your vote, I extremely appreciate the amount of lift we all have collective done this year. I don't think that this last year we started in a particular great landscape as is, but we have definitely made adjustments in the ways in which we talk with each other, the way in which we review the information, the way in which we are even fostering dissent has been from a space of much more gratitude that I have experienced in the past. I want to give an immense thanks to Dr. Jenkins, who have received a really critical call to come home and have accepted that call. So I know some of the names of the people that have called you, and I pray for them. Really sincerely, yes, thank you so much for applying for a job that is a really hard job in a time that is one of the hardest time to be transitioning. So really grateful to you. Extremely grateful for this entire team in central office. So many of you have been my colleagues. So many of you are people that have taught me so much, and I have learned so much from you. And I have deeply gratitude for all of you and the amount of work that you have lifted this year and the amount of work that you have courageously faced, and your willingness to never give up on figuring out and how to solve problems. And I know that all of you are the ones that get the greatest criticism of our district. We're always falling short in some ways. And I appreciate your candor to, getting up every morning with fresh eyes and helping us navigate the politics of education and providing us with all the information we need to make decisions. I want to acknowledge the many staff that our essential staff in our buildings, our custodials, our cafeteria workers, our nurses, folks that, you know, do so much work behind the scenes every day. And we, you know, we don't always talk about them, but like they are the backbones of our buildings and our communities. To the student services staff who's going to be or already experiencing, you know, great challenges in making sure that all our emotional needs, both of themselves as adults, but also of our children, are taken care of as we are navigating some complicated emotional distress. And lastly, but not least, to all our teachers, we know that you all are the key fundamental glue to instruction in so many ways in our classroom. So I know we have asked you to stretch your ability to deliver the things that you know best. And I know it doesn't always shows the best work. But I want all the teachers in our school districts to know that we see you and we acknowledge you and we value you. And if today wasn't your best day, no worries. We got a few more days to change that. So thank you, all of you, for all the amazing work. And with that, I want to see if anybody else. Oh, okay, Chris.
One final but very important shout out to all of the MSCR and MMSD staff and community partners who are providing childcare in our buildings. Without this childcare, an awful lot of parents and essential workers would not be able to go to work. You are very much appreciated for what you are doing for our kids and for our families and for our whole community. Thank you.
I echo that. And then I know that there's so many folks and other professionals that we are missing to call out specifically, but we know that, you know, there's a lot of people that make this work possible for all of us. Dr. Jenkins, do you want to close us with any final words, and then we'll call the meeting to a closure?
Yes, first of all, let me just say it was amazing seeing our children out there today and along with our staff. And I just cannot thank the individuals who volunteered to participate in the child care program enough. Over 70%, that's amazing. And the smiles on their faces and just their enthusiasm today when I went out to the schools and just the principals, and it was just like, wow, here we are, we're back in the fall of 2020, and we're starting an amazing year in our virtual space that everyone just said today that I talked to, hey, we're all stepping up and doing our part. And that's so amazing. I thank you as a board for your leadership and just giving me this wonderful opportunity. I can't be humbled enough by this community and the welcoming that you have shown me coming back, showing my family, and this amazing team that we have here at our central office. And I lean on them. And I want you to know that I can only do what I've been able to do because of them. They have just come in. I made a quick organizational change. They took it and they ran with it. You know, they could have folded, but they stood straight up and said, let's do it. We're in this together because we want to support our children, support our staff, support our community. So publicly, I want to say thank you to all of them. I don't probably say that enough because we're moving so fast, but thank you for what you guys are doing. And thank you again to you as a board. I think you guys are so conscious. And a part of my wanting to come back was I wanted to be in a community and having a board that had a sense of consciousness about humanity. And that's what I feel here. And so, hey, I'm fired up. Let's go get it again tomorrow. Okay?
Sounds good, Dr. Jenkins. The same way that our schools have a lot of behind the scene folks, we as boards have also our backbone person, and that's Barb, who has done an amazing job of making sure that we're all together and we're meeting virtually, and that there's public comments, and that, you know, we are on YouTube and making ourselves accessible to folks. So thank you so much, Barb.
Thank
for
you.
engaging in us, not giving up. And I really not sure when you were retiring. So I think you'll be 90 years old here still doing things here for MMSD. No, maybe kidding. But I, you know, sincerely, like, I can see all my colleagues here really lighting up and agreeing with me when I say thank you to you too, as you have provided fairly quickly a great level of support and making sure that this public meeting continue to be public and accessible to folks. So without further ado, I would like to call the meeting to closure. Is there a motion?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
7-0, motion carries. Thank you, everyone, and happy second day of school tomorrow.
Bye all.
Bye, have a good evening.
Bye.
Night, thank you.